Spoilers for that world quest that starts in Petrichor. Hey, it's me, Roosevelt! In 4.6, we learned a few interesting things about fate and Fortuna, and maybe even the heavenly principles. Oh, and bees.
Bees?
I don't really have anything else to say for an intro, so it's Remuria time. The story starts in Sumeru. Remus once resided in the desert as a singer of the oases, but his home would be lost to the blazing sun. That is, he did not want to be ruled by King Deshret. So Remus left and wandered to the high seas, intending to just die there. But he came across a city. Not just any city, but one beneath the abyssal depths, and older than the land itself. In the ruins of that city, he discovered a dilapidated temple underneath a silver-white cedar tree, circled by golden bees. The bees once protected the silver tree, but now had lost their minds and forms. Despite this, they still retained an incredible ability, the gift of being able to see the future. And one such bee, who we would come to know as Sybilla, would tell Remus he was destined for greatness. She asked Remus if he would like to be shown the way up, despite also knowing the way down. For the destined greatness was also destined to destruction. He agreed because he was like, well, if you're giving me a choice now, I'll probably have a choice later, right? Anyway, with that, the underground hollow crumbled, and the silver tree turned into a grand golden ship. Remus would go on to build a tower in Meropes, and from there gathered a new nation of peace and justice. The Song of Enlightenment began and his kingdom flourished. But always haunting Remus was Sybilla's prophecy. Oceans will rise, empires will fall. That is Fortuna, the unchanging and immutable wheel of fate. But Remus would not yield, because he thought this whole fate situation was a dog deal. Now, Sybilla only knew of the future and not the cause that demanded this fated destruction. But seeing his resolve, she suggested that Egeria might know some answers to his questions. So Remus set off to break the curse of fate by finding answers as well as the source water beneath the high sea. There, Egeria was imprisoned. Guarding the prison was Scylla, the dragonborn prince. Remus and Scylla would have a bit of a scuffle until Remus voiced his purpose, to which Scylla responded to with laughter. Fate is a right of heaven, and to resist is akin to revolting against divine authority. But Scylla would allow Remus an audience with Egeria, and there he learned terrifying secrets, including Egeria's sin and the curse. But of course, no answer on how to avoid the fated destruction. But Remus still had his determination. There, he cooked up a plan that goes like this. He would imbue the souls of his subjects into an insoluble ichor, and place that ichor into immortal bronze and stone bodies. Before leaving, he took a cup of the purest water, from which he would use to create this insoluble ichor. This was his first safeguard in protecting his kingdom from destruction. You know, from dissolving or dying or whatever. But there was still so much more that he would need to do to save his kingdom. Spoiler alert, that didn't happen. This terrible fate was looming over a flourishing Remuria. Remus, instead of drowning in despair, became consumed with wild fantasies of toppling this fate, and he locked himself in his imperial tower. There he would toil away, searching for a flaw in the Master of Fortuna's Musica Mundana. After many days, he began to understand Fortuna. He could read every note, but he lacked a pen to compose his own symphony. Now, these lines are very important, and I'll explain them later, but for now, just think of Fortuna as a symphony of fate, and Remus wanted to compose his own alternative symphony. It's like dueling banjos, but make it classical. But Remus couldn't make his own symphony, so he turned to Sybilla. Sybilla would selflessly sacrifice herself to become Remus's Grand Symphony. This Grand Symphony is what we now know as Phobos. Phobos was Remus's ultimate plan. The golden ship would become a giant building/instrument to resonate the song of the Grand Symphony throughout the kingdom. Aqueducts would carry Ichor to every corner, and Remus appointed 4 Harmos, including Boethius and Cassiodor, to spread the song. At first, the Grand Symphony broke the fetters of fate, paving new paths. but many sought to violently stomp out any discordant notes. And these notes included bishops, barbarians, and locknights, and basically anyone who refused to join Remuria. So at some point, Remus knew something was wrong with the Grand Symphony, because he did not actually wish for all this death and destructive conquest. The Harmost Cassiodor also sensed something was afoot, and Remus freed Cassiodor from the tie of the Grand Symphony. And we later learned that Remus made a secret deal with Scylla to pass on the Grand Symphony to the Dragon Prince, though Scylla did not succeed at the time, and was eventually sealed with the Ichor by Boethius. We also learned the reason for the Grand Symphony's failure. Sybilla, as Phobos, or the symphony itself, resonated with the will of all people, and that's why Phobos speaks as a collective. The discord in the symphony was Phobos responding to the will of everyone, not just those wishing for peace and justice, but also those with fanatical conviction and a desire for power and such. It turns out Boethius had long been a puppet of Phobos, acting upon this collective will of bad vibes, and Sybilla's effort to basically betray Remus. So between all the chaos and Scylla's failure to reach Remus in time, this would all lead to the fall of Remuria, where it would sink to its grave in abyssal depths. Although Sybilla would say this was no one's fault, really. This was destiny. Everything that happened was essentially predetermined. And this also implies that all the supposedly selfless actions of Sybilla, helping Remus in any way possible, were just cogs in the machine of fate. Or melodies in the symphony of fate, to better keep up with the music analogy. And now, all that's really left of Remuria is basically this distant and legendary history. But in contrast to accounts focusing on Remus's failures in the role of the destruction of Remuria, we've learned that Remus was actually quite nuanced. He had what Scylla referred to as the curse that all gods have, which was a love of humanity. And to Remus, this love of humanity meant defying fate on their behalf. But the fervid wish to defy fate was annihilated by ambition and betrayal. This was Fortuna. So that's a summary of the story. And there are a lot of details I did not include because I just wanted an overview, but I'm going to link a bunch of other videos in the description that have a more detailed history of Remuria in case you're interested. But now, I want to hone in on this whole musical theme of Remuria. Because remember that time, like 5 minutes ago, where I said this one line about Fortuna and Musica Mundana was important? Yeah, so let's talk about the Symphony of Fate. Fortuna was first introduced to us back in 4.0 with the first enigmatic page written by René de Petrichor of the Narzissenkreuz Ordo. There, he explained what Fortuna really is. It's the concept that kingdoms will rise and fall, and in their ashes, new kingdoms will rise. This echoes Sybilla's words about oceans rising and kingdoms falling. This is Fortuna, the unyielding wheel of fate. René goes on to describe it as a rudimentary form of his world formula. As a reminder, René's world formula was a calculation that predicted the end of the world and served as the entire motive for the Narzissenkreuz Ordo's actions. In the following patch, a note from Ruggiero complicates the definition a bit. Ruggiero was the first Doge of Petrichor, or High Magistrate, who helped rebuild the town long ago and who was fixated on uncovering the secrets of Remuria. In his note, he says it's the title of a symphony, but not just any symphony. In ancient times, symphonies were used to control Fontaine, as they were connected to a mysterious, fundamental power. So we had two definitions that were seemingly unrelated. But now we have the information to put the pieces together. I mean, there's the confirmation that Phobos, the Grand Symphony, was indeed influencing the paths of people. Secondly, there's a note you can find in the Fated Castle that talks more about Fortuna, as well as the Musica Mundana, which belongs to the master of Fortuna. To summarize, there are three types of music: Musica Instrumentalis, Musica Humana, and Musica Mundana. The Latin translations are relatively straightforward: music of instruments, music of humans, and music of the world. Instrumentalis is the most basic form, as the music we can hear and we play on instruments. The other two are a bit more metaphysical, though. Musica Humana is the music of man, but also gods. In many ways, you may describe this as the personal song of an individual. And then there's Musica Mundana. Musica Mundana is the most transcendental version and represents the music of origin. It's associated with the turning of the seasons, the elements, and celestial signs. Oh, and just the operations of the universe. The note goes on to say that Fortuna is a variety of Musica Mundana, but Musica Mundana is more encompassing than Fortuna. And it also provides this analogy. Imagine a harp where every constituent of the world is a string. Musica Mundana does not come from one string, but a resonance of all strings. This is why Phobos resonated with many conflicting wills. Now, this is still very metaphysical at this point and may be hard to conceptualize, but this is also very exciting for me. A few months ago, I made a video on Fortuna. There, I suggested that Fortuna, being associated with both symphonies and fate, was alluding to a historical concept called Musica Universalis, or the music of the spheres. The historical statesman and scholar Boethius wrote a lot about music and also divided it into 3 types, the same way Genshin does with Instrumentalis, Humana, and Mundana. This Boethius's Musica Mundana is essentially equivalent to Musica Universalis, or the music of the spheres. The music of the spheres is an old philosophical proposition that the movement of celestial bodies creates music. This music is inaudible but resonates with everything in the universe. It's a type of music that can only be heard by the soul. This concept is based on Pythagorean ideas that everything, including music and astronomy, is inherently mathematical. The philosopher Plato, who is generally thought to be influenced by Pythagorean thought, had compared the universe to a symphony composed by a math whiz. So, the music of the spheres asserts that celestial bodies exert an influence on everything in the universe in some way, and that stars are inherently musical. In Genshin, the Harmos note even says as much, commenting on both false and true celestial signs associated with Musica Mundana. In the big picture, though, this makes sense why Genshin ties both music and the stars to fate. Fate is written in the stars, but is also woven from countless fibers, like the strings of a harp. And just some side note speculation of mine, this connection between music, stars, and fate also made me wonder if Rene dabbled in astrology to calculate his world formula. We do know he studied the Magistrorum Universitas of Conria, which likely practiced astrology, and he was specifically trying to reconstruct Conria's world formula. If everything, not just fate, is basically a symphony performed by the stars, it would make sense then why he was able to basically quantify this abstract concept of Fortuna. Also, the fact that he was trying to reconstruct Conria's world formula implies that Conria also had a deeper understanding of fate beyond the general concept of Fortuna. If that's the case, Conria would have very likely foreseen its own destruction as well. Anyway, sorry, I just love talking about Conria, so I digress. Here's the bottom line and the key thing to know. Musica Mundana, at its core, is the sonorous fabric of the universe, and all the threads of fate weave together. Fortuna is one aspect of this fabric, is the unchanging wheel of fate and the fated cycles of destruction. Any music with specifications similar to Fortuna can be called Musica Mundana. But there's yet another aspect of Musica Mundana which is very important to the plot of Genshin, and it has to do with the relation between Musica Mundana and Musica Humana, or to simplify, the symphony of the world and its master, and the symphony of man. The Harmos note mentions that the Musica Humana is music of both mortals and gods, so probably like god-kings and archons. Mortals and gods are destined to be conquered by Fortuna and sink into dreamless dreams. But there's an interesting section in this which says this doesn't have to be the case. The fractured excerpts suggest that Musica Mundana, the music of mortals and gods, can be played in such a way that other strings vibrate. And it is for this reason that the music of mortals and gods can replace the music of the world. This is what Remus wanted to do, create his own Fortuna to replace the existing Fortuna. He understood Fortuna, but he did not have a pen to write his own symphony, thus turning to Sybilla. This gets deeper looking at some other notes. One differentiates between 4 types of phenomena in the world: substance, property, quality, and relation. And it goes on to say, the so-called piercing of the ego, or to play one's own music, is to pierce substance and quality, thus completely controlling one's own will, such that the Musica Humana may be as the Musica Mundana. Now, this description is quite esoteric, which obviously means it's somehow related to the Narzissenkreuz Ordo. But it's at this point it should become clearer as to how much the Narzissenkreuz Ordo was influenced by Remurian knowledge. Narzissenkreuz thought that the only chance they had of saving the world was merging together all the wills of Fontaine to create a strong singular will. Extending the music analogy, René wanted to garner all the strings he could to create a harmonious symphony playing as one. Now, any Narzissenkreuz talk is bound to get loosey-goosey, but bear with me. Going back to the 4 types of phenomena in the world: substance, property, quality, and relation. Quality, which is involved in the piercing of the ego and playing one's own music, is the keystone. It is broken up into a quadrant consisting of memories, wishes, soul, and persona. This may sound familiar because those 4 aspects were the experiential ingredients needed to craft the Holy Blade of Narzissenkreuz. They sought the Holy Blade to condense all will. And yet another note in the castle says that the strings of a harp or sword, or anything really, can play music as long as it is an object bestowed with meaning. This is nearly identical to what Kader and René told us about the Holy Blade. Anything can be a Holy Blade as long as it has meaning, even a golden-haired traveler. And as a quick refresher as to what exactly a Holy Blade is, a Holy Blade is forged from consummate will. It can create or destroy a universe or even a dream. A Holy Blade can cut through anything. Or, you could even say, it can pierce through anything, perhaps including the ego. The piercing of the ego is to play one's own music. And this was actually the goal of Narzissenkreuz. René wanted to do this in order to save the world from destruction predicted by the world formula, or the destruction destined by Fortuna. And it's slightly more than condensing a singular will, because remember what René said he wanted to become: a descender. A descender is one whose will can rival an entire world. In musical terms, the Musica Humana may be as the Musica Mundana, or even replace it. So let me just step back and summarize this very succinctly. The music of man can replace the music of the world if one can play their own music in a process called piercing the ego. This process is the same as a holy blade cutting through the world, or a descender having a will to rival a world. So I hope all this ties together and shows the significance of all these different lore puzzle pieces we have in Fontaine to create a bigger picture about the nature of fate. But I also think this idea of fate being tied to music isn't unique to Fontaine. This next part is going to have some speculation, so disclaimer. It goes without saying that music is important in Genshin in general. Like Venti knowing all the songs of the past, present, and future, Seelies as singers, the names of the Moon Sisters, etc. It'd be nearly impossible to summarize everything. I mean, even the iridescent Arataki Rockin' for Life, No Sleep Till Brooklyn, Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, Turned Down for What, Tour de Force of Awesomeness is a cutesy music event that I think had a lot of lore. Like, there's that big war that A and Miko were talking about, although Dainsleif literally alluded to that in the Travails trailer like 4 years ago. I'm personally more interested in this one sussy line that compares Goro and Miss Hina to Traveler and their sibling. Or should I say, alleged sibling. Okay, I got distracted. That's actually a completely different topic. I'll stop. I digress. Okay, we're locking in. Back in my first video on Fortuna, I talked a bit about this one line in Rogero's notes. Ancient documents record the existence of such great symphonies that were connected to the fundamental power. I noted at the time, it reminded me of the Sourcesong from Aranyaka. Just based on the name alone. Fundamental, source, origin, core, you know, that type of thing. Arama told us how Rukkhadevata would sing and how her power was so great because her tune was so close to the Sourcesong. So strong, in fact, when she sang, the Ashvata sprouted forth from Sarva, or Irminsul, and which would then produce a pomegranate full of Aranara seeds. With all this new information about Fortuna, it makes sense that this fundamental power Rogero spoke of is, in fact, the Musica Mundana. And, as it turns out, the description of Musica Mundana is incredibly similar to Arusudraka's explanation of the Sourcesong. A note in Fontaine says, "The Musica Mundana is the music of origin. It is the beginning and end of all music. From it does all spring, and to it shall all return." Compare to the Aranar's words. Songs are like rivers. They derive from the same origin, the Sourcesong. She is the home to all songs and the source of all great rivers. Just like all the creeks eventually flow into the sea, all the songs eventually converge into one, into the Sourcesong. So, this fundamental power, the Sourcesong, and Musica Mundana are all the same thing. And given its inclusion in Aranyaka, this isn't just a Fontaine or Remuria thing. So the next question that naturally arises is, how does this fit in with what we currently think, or currently know, or currently think we know? This may be difficult to incorporate into our current conceptualizations of the laws of Teyvat, but this is giving me an opportunity to explore some ideas I've had for a bit now. So we're really going to shift gears. In the Perils of the Dark Chasm World quest, there's a dark fog blocking your path, and you find a note saying that 2 mysterious bells, when rung, cleared the fog. So you ring the 2 bells, and they glow with a blue or even cyan energy, and the fog clears. Now, this isn't a song or symphony, but bells are instruments that produce distinct notes that reverberate, and these had a certain power associated with them. And it's worth noting that the bells and the 2 abyss lectors, as well as the mysterious writing on the wall, are all references to the Song of the Bell, a 1789 poem. Now, this may be a seemingly insignificant example, but this is a segue to what I really want to talk about. Extra creativity disclaimer here. We're back in Tinfoil Town, baby! When you defeat the 2 abyss lectors, you receive a key that leads to the stony halls where the Spirit Stone resides. It's similarly covered by a dark fog and just abyss goo, and the instructions tablet says to activate the devices and apply external force. That is, hit the nail. Now, this seems like an overly simplistic thing to do, but the quest before this was hitting and ringing bells, so it makes me wonder, is the Spirit Stone an instrument similar to the bells? Or maybe less of an instrument, and you're hitting the nail in the same way you might strike a tuning fork. Here's where I'm going with this, and hear me out. Ashikai recently made a video about ley lines and spirit veins, and how the celestial nails are like divine acupuncture, and this is all a part of the machine of fate, and how Celestia controls Teyvat. I would like to propose or suggest a musical twist to this. I wonder if, perhaps, these tuning forks are able to manipulate the ley lines through pure notes. Because a tuning fork emits a pure musical tone, and that tone is specifically used to tune instruments. And, if fate is a symphony, then all of the instruments and strings must be in tune. Okay, admittedly, this is pretty half-baked, and the nails don't look anything like a tuning fork or any instrument that I know of for that matter. But listen, I think it's cool to think about. And this is also an excuse for me to share an observation from like a billion years ago. Have y'all ever listened to the Spirit Stone before? Yes, listen to it. Just go hang out on it like a hungry possum. It makes this incredibly alien sound with clearly musical tones. Here, listen. Yeah, in general, Genshin has a lot of really cool sound design. For example, Neuvillette has a lot of bell sounds associated with his kit, and when you walk around as Nahida, you can also hear faint chimes. Also, weirdly, Lisa also has musical attacks. Anyway, just a few other random observations, but that's all I got here. Well, class, I hope you learned a lot today about Musica Mundana and other stuff. Hey, one last thing I wanted to point out. I intentionally avoided this to prevent confusion around what Fortuna is, but early on, Risley told us that Remus's golden ship was also named Fortuna. One of Rogero's new notes makes it explicit that the ship-turned-instrument was named for the concept of Fortuna, in a move which, I assume, is Remus's way of sticking it to the man. Anyway, that's it for now. I appreciate y'all so much. Thank you for watching and liking and commenting and subscribing. It really means the world to me. Thanks again, check your smoke detector batteries, and stay fresh, cheese bags. Okay, bye.